Hi, good morning, and welcome to Kunsong Payo Choling. We have a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon for you this morning, and we hope you enjoy it. The title of the teaching is What is Buddhahood? So we begin.
So today we will talk somewhat about the path itself. And the path is, of course, the method that Lord Buddha taught in order to achieve realization. Now, in truth, the term path can be described, can describe many different kinds of activities that one can do. One could say that one was on a spiritual path, even never having heard of the Buddhist teaching. Way that one's particular religious experience is a path. But in this context, since we are speaking of the Buddhist teaching, when path, I mean specifically these teachings that are taught by the Buddha, as the Buddha presented them in a way to bring about supreme enlightenment. So when I say path, I speak of that which is geared to bring about supreme enlightenment specifically and solely. When we look at the components of the path, and when we look at what the path is directed toward, we notice that in the path has several qualities, and among them there are three that are very important. In that the path has the capacity to achieve clarity. It itself has clarity. The path has purity, and it has medicinal action, or remedial action. These three factors are very important to remember, and we should go over them at some length so that we can fully understand what that means. First of all, I've just described actually remedial action. If you've listened to some of the words that I have said to the children in their class, actually we should think of it in this way. When we think of samsara, or cyclic existence, or the realm of suffering, or the realm of ordinary experience that we are engaged in, we know that, first of all, everything within that realm is impermanent. And that whether one feels happiness or unhappiness, whether one feels good or bad, whether one has a beneficial experience or a difficult experience, all experiences are impermanent. So that even if one finds stability and happiness, that stability and happiness is not lasting. It will not last. It will change. It will alter. And there will always be a beginning of the experience and an end of the experience. So we can look at that and examine that. Within cyclic existence as well, one cannot find, and this is one of the ways to determine cyclic existence, one cannot find a method to end suffering permanently. One cannot find a permanent cure or a permanent antidote, a permanent method by which all suffering can be appeased. That's not to say that having experienced some difficulty that one could not solve the problem temporarily. We all know that we can do that. We all know that if we're hungry, we can eat, and then the hunger will be appeased. But we know that that hunger being appeased is a temporary experience, and that eventually, after some time, we'll always get hungry again. We know that if we're cold, we can put on some warm clothing or crank up the heat, and we know that that will solve the problem, but again, it always solves the problem temporarily. In that clothing is impermanent, in that weather changes, and that the situation never remains stable in the way that it seems to be, but is constantly changing. So it isn't to say that we cannot apply temporary remedial action, but the path is that which actually institutes the causes, actually in order to bring about the result of enlightenment. It is considered that those causes do not arise within samsara. That is to say that they are not ordinary activities. They are not activities that are born of the interdependent cause and effect relationships that naturally occur within our minds and within our environments due to our particular karma, or due to our particular beliefs, or due to our awareness, a relative awareness. According to the Buddha, and this is something that we should all remember, there is not a naturally occurring, naturally progressive stream of events that eventually will somehow unconsciously lead to enlightenment. And that disputes something that is a very popular concept, especially at this time, and actually especially amongst what are called New Age people or New Thinking people. The idea is that somehow, if we simply keep going, by virtue of that, we will stumble upon enlightenment eventually. That somehow we will naturally get better, naturally improve. And left to our own resources, things will simply get better, and we'll march right through the door of liberation naturally and basically unconsciously. And according to the Buddha, that simply is not so. There is no naturally occurring stream of events within samsara that will naturally lead to enlightenment, because the components of enlightenment are not found in samsara. The components of enlightenment are the realization of the primordial wisdom state, the awakening to the state which is non-dual emptiness and luminosity, and also the realization of the end or cessation of all desire, of all egocentricity, of all those things which promote clinging and the belief in ego as being solid. So what I'm speaking of now is the egoless state. That does not naturally occur, because if you think about it, what arises within samsara is focus upon phenomena, a constant focus upon phenomena. Whether it's good phenomena or bad phenomena, whether it's high phenomena or low phenomena, whether it's spiritual phenomena or material phenomena, whatever it happens to be, we are continually involved in a subjective and objective, objective kind of perceptual process. We are continually involved in focusing on other as opposed to and as distinguished from self. That process doesn't naturally end. Our perceptual process occurs in that way, and as it occurs, it continues to reinforce itself, if anything, rather than to allow itself to dissipate. That is to say, the more I conceive of myself as self, and the more I conceive of you as being other, in order to define that self, the more firm that division becomes. It continues to reinforce itself. And even if we try some meditation, if that meditation doesn't have a proper technology, if it isn't a meditation that is already based on an enlightened intention, that is to say, arising from an enlightened intention, that meditation, although it can be a very subtle experience, will still allow for subjective-objective perception. Because you are having meditation, you are having an experience. You know, I am feeling this, I am not feeling this. This is stopping, this is going. And meditation of that kind is like that. So it takes a very specific and very profound technology in one's meditation in order to bring about both the egoless state and the awakening to the primordial wisdom state, or that state which is emptiness and luminosity as one, combined. We then have to practice a path that is remedial to that divided, diluted experience. We have to apply a path that is the antidote to dualistic perception. We also have to apply a path that is the antidote to ego clinging. We have to apply a path that is the antidote to simply the absence of our ability to perceive the primordial wisdom state. Because it is possible to have subjective-objective experience as an arhat does, one who is an extremely developed meditation master. It is possible to have subjective-objective experience and yet be free of desire and ego clinging and reaction associated with ego clinging. So we have to apply a path that both realizes the cessation of that desire and also becomes awakened through the eradication of dualistic perception, awakened to the primordial wisdom nature. An arhat is not necessarily awakened to that primordial wisdom nature. It is simply free of objective, subjective perception. And there is a difference. It's a very difficult to understand difference. It's a very slight difference, a very gossamer thin difference. But there is definitely a difference. So, the path then should be considered something that applies the antidote to these, basically to these two things, and applies it successfully so that this can be pacified, and then one realizes one's true nature. One awakens as the Buddha is awake. The path also must have the quality of clarity. The quality of clarity is best understood by understanding the confusion that we revolve in. Our perception, according to the Buddha, is a deluded perception. All of the activity that we engage in, all of the perception that we engage in, is actually based on the foundational sort of presupposition of self-nature as being inherently real and solid. And the only way that one can hold the idea of self-nature as being inherently real, the only way that that is really possible, is if one were to also externalize phenomena. Because in order to hold the idea of self-nature as being inherently real, one must distinguish between self and other. So phenomena must also be held as real and separate. And of course that's easily seen. We see phenomena. We can understand that. But that process extends even into very subtle levels, in that even if we close our eyes and perceive no phenomena, even if we put ourselves in practically a vacuum, hearing nothing, smelling nothing, seeing nothing, we will still have our thoughts, and our thoughts will seem to us to be separate from ourselves, in that I am having that thought. And we have literally never had a thought that we did not externalize. Thought itself is externalized. Feeling, perception, these are all externalized, in that I am seeing, I am hearing, I am smelling. I am having this experience. The entire perceptual process is an externalized process, a very subtle one. Sometimes our feelings can be so intimately experienced, seeming so close to us, that unless we really examine what we're doing and we really watch our mind and the play that our mind goes through, we won't notice actually that we are having this feeling. We won't notice that in fact even the most personal, intimate, and subtle feelings have been externalized, or we could not view them. We could not view them at all. So we must practice a path that has as its basis clarity. The path, first of all, assumes the enlightened essence to be the true essence. The path also assumes the state of awakening or the state of enlightenment, the egoless state which also realizes the primordial wisdom nature. The path assumes that to be the awakened state. It assumes that to be truth. Although I hate to use the word truth, because when we hear the word truth in our language, we hear it to be a solid substance that one can measure. And one should really not think of it in that way. The path then must bring about clear perception. And according to the Buddhist teachings, clear perception is perception which is not perception as we understand it at all, because we always experience externalized or objective perception, or specific perception, I should say. Specific perception. Instead, the path then brings about a perceptual process which is more like luminosity. It is non-specific. It is free of all contrivance. It is free of all conceptualization. It is more like luminosity than it is like the specific perception that we are accustomed to. One could call that pure view, or one could simply call that awakening. It is free of duality, free of egocentricity, or free of ego clinging, free of conceptualization. It is pure cognition, free of all limitation or specific quality. It's pure luminosity. The path must also have purity. And that is to say, it must have the ability to purify all defilements, because these defilements are the very cause of our remaining endlessly in cyclic existence. The impurities specifically are, of course, the three root poisons: hatred or anger, greed or grasping or clinging, and ignorance or our dualistic perception, or the kind of perception that comes with the belief in self-nature as inherently real. That ignorance isn't ignorance as we understand it. We think of ignorance as being uneducated. But that ignorance means more like the inability to view or to taste the primordial wisdom nature. That is what that ignorance is called. So hatred, greed, and ignorance, these are the three basic defilements, and the path must purify those, because without purifying those, we will continually give birth to the cause and effect relationships that cause us to be bound in cyclic existence, that cause us to revolve endlessly in samsara. We cannot help but do that. The moment we cling to self-nature, the moment we conceive of self-nature as being inherently real, at that very moment we actually give birth to universes and worlds of cause and effect relationship. Because the moment we cling to self and believe in self-nature as being inherently real, at that moment we also distinguish between self and other. And at that moment there is room, there is space, there is rich potential, and there is energy in order to make cause and effect relationship take place. And it does take place instantaneously. And so worlds of karma and cause and effect relationship naturally arise simply from the thought of self. Simply from that. And of course, hatred or anger, according to the Buddha's teaching, one moment of hatred or anger gives birth to worlds of cause and effect relationships that have the rich potential for suffering. Because of the nature of anger, because of what it is, it has the rich potential for great suffering. Also the case with ignorance, the inability to perceive the primordial wisdom nature. In that case, one automatically and consistently acts inappropriately. We do not act like what is. We act according to the belief in self-nature as being inherently real, and we act for or against other with either hope or fear, and sometimes indifference, but always for and against each other, and against all phenomena. And that wheel of activity continues and continues and continues. In order to break the wheel, in order to pacify that, in order to achieve realization, one must dispel and pacify all of those root poisons and all of the auxiliary poisons that come from that as well, such as jealousy, such as competitiveness, such as aggressiveness, such as materialism, all of these many different kinds of things. When the path is described from our point of view, that is according to the teachings of Guru Rinpoche, according to the Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions, specifically Vajrayana practiced here, we are speaking of a path that will do all of that, that will actually get rid of all impurities, all defilements, and will also accomplish the way by which the primordial wisdom state is realized. We don't want to stop only at ridding ourselves of impurities, but also we want to awaken to non-dual emptiness and luminosity. And that achieves supreme Buddhahood, whereas simply removing defilements can achieve arhathood, or mastery of some kind. We can think of the word as mastery. But we wish to achieve supreme enlightenment, and that's why we must practice the path perfectly and according to its proper technology. We should also think like this. How is it that one could conceivably pacify all poisons, the hatred, greed, and ignorance, and all of the auxiliary poisons that come from that, and still not achieve full realization? If one were to pacify all poisons, one would still have a subtle, habitual tendency to perceive in a divided way one would still have a subtle, objective tendency. That is to say, one would still, in a subtle way, and it's very subtle because hatred, greed, and ignorance would be removed, or nearly so. One would still differentiate between subject and object. One would make a very subtle or slight difference. In removing the root poisons, the energy associated with heavily negative or even heavily positive activity associated with that subjective objective experience would be gone. But the subtle, almost knee-jerk reaction or habitual tendency to perceive in a subjective and objective way, to perceive in a divided way, still remains, but it's gossamer thin. It's like a residue. And so even if one has ridden themselves of all the poisons, one has not achieved supreme realization with that which we call Buddhahood. Buddhahood is so far beyond that as to be as different from the sun as a flashlight is. Buddhahood is actually an awakening to that nature which has absolutely no distinction whatever. Not even the most gossamer thin distinction. There is no potential for distinction. There is no scent of distinction. The state itself cannot be described or a name for that very reason, because it would distinguish the state from something else, or even from that one who had achieved the state, and that simply is not possible. In that state, full awakening is free of any such residual distinction. Therefore, one is completely unblocked. One's view is totally unobscured. And therefore, what is experienced is the full potency of awakening to that nature which is utter emptiness and luminosity. Within that nature, all potential arises. Yet, as a Buddha, one realizes the innate nature and remains fully and completely aware in an unobstructed way, and most especially in a way that is not specific, which would bring about obstruction. Specificness, or what is the word I'm looking for? Specificity would bring about obstruction. And in this state, there's no such thing. Now, we can think about something else. And this is a closing remark that I think is very interesting. If one were to remove all root poisons from the mind stream, would one experience liberation from cyclic existence, or liberation from samsara? Simply that. If one were to remove the three root poisons and their auxiliary poisons from the mind stream, would one experience liberation?
I would think not, because they would still have the objective subjective and so they could still create cause and effect, and then they're still stuck in samsara. So they would be the three.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Your thinking is correct, and yet actually the answer is yes. That one once pacifies all defilements, including ego clinging. Even though one has that subtle perception of subjective and objective, if one has pacified ego clinging, if one has pacified hatred and anger, and all reactive phenomena that comes from that, our all reactive activity that comes from that, and if one has pacified ignorance in a very profound way, one would actually be liberated from the realm of suffering. Because Lord Buddha taught us that desire is the cause of suffering. So one would actually be liberated from the realm of suffering. But you are right, you just didn't use the right words. You are correct in assuming that one would not achieve full Buddhahood. And that is the ultimate liberation, that is the awakened state, that is the ultimate and final goal beyond which there is nothing more.
How would one achieve arhathood without achieving Buddhahood?
They are different. In that with arhathood, there is a residual subjective objective focus. But there is no heavy energy associated with the three root poisons, and the cause and effect relationships associated with the three root poisons have been pacified. See?
So would you imagine, though, that once somebody has achieved arhathood, they are very close to Buddhahood?
Absolutely.
So they're almost there, and they will get there. From that point,
I would say very close. I would say very close, and I would say they will not go backwards. Yeah, but it reminds me, this perhaps is an analogy that is near and dear to my mind, since, as you all know, I've been involved in a diet. There's a big difference between a size 9 and size 12 dress. It's almost there, but it isn't. Yes.
So what would an arhat do to get to Buddhahood? What would be the next?
An arhat would meditate in such a way as to realize. Basically, an arhat has undergone the processes most clearly associated with the first turning of the wheel, pacifying hatred, greed, and ignorance. He's followed the Eightfold Path. He is engaged in meritorious, or a virtuous rather, conduct. He's a conduct. He has engaged in purification processes. That's what the arhat has engaged in.
But he hasn't meditated.
Well, yes, in the way that one meditates according to the Buddha's first teaching. But it isn't the same kind of profound experience of shunyata that comes later, in the later teachings. And one would meditate in such a way as to realize, awaken to the primordial wisdom nature.
Would one in that state know that there was more? In other words, if one...
It's hard to say. I guess some do and some don't. Depends on if they meet up with a Buddha who can tell them. I think so. I don't know. It would seem to me to be the case, and this is just a guess answer, maybe an educated guess answer. And what I'm going on is the stories of the Buddha having gone to the different yogis and different teachers, and having meditated until he reached that kind of state, and then having said, there's more. I know that there's more. So I think that that potential for that is there. When he said that, he was not, he had not displayed his Buddhahood yet. And yet he was able to say that. I don't know that that is common, but I think that that is possible. Bob, you had a question?
guess I did. Jetsunma, have you, from another point of view, basically outlined the blueprint of the palace of the Dakini in these 3 points? And one of our practices, the Sindogma practice, it says self-nature arises as the Dakini out of the palace of Dharma shaped like a triangle. Is this the triangle that is the palace of the Dakini, these 3 points?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I think I'll have to do what Bakadoku said and say, I don't know. When I think of, let me find out for you, and I'll, at a different time when it's not a public class, I will be glad to do that. I don't feel too comfortable giving generation stage teachings at this point. No.
If one is free of subject-object discrimination, are you then automatically, is that the enlightenment state?
That is arhathood.
Okay, then
But you're saying you can be free of subject-object discrimination.
Mm-hmm. And still not be awake?
And still not have realized the awakened state. Okay. And at that point there is still a residue of subject-object discrimination. It's like you're free of it, but you haven't awakened to the nature.
Okay.
So one remains still slightly fixated, but in the most gossamer thin way, as to be almost unseeable.
Okay, so it's possible to be free of desire and ego clinging, but still have subject-object.
Yes, but it would be very gossamer, yeah.
And when you're rid of even the most gossamer, is that then enlightenment?
When you awaken to the non-dual nature of emptiness and luminosity, only then can you be truly free of objective, subjective.
Okay.
Only then can you be really free of that. Yes?
Could you say that's like the difference between experiencing oneness with all life and being it?
What you're describing is an experience that's more like cosmic consciousness.
Right, yeah,
it really isn't Buddhahood at all.
Right. So that's experiencing oneness with all that is, as distinct from simply being it, which would be Buddhahood?
Nope,
No?
that wouldn't be Buddhahood.
Okay.
First of all, experiencing oneness with all that is doesn't necessarily mean that you have eradicated ego clinging, doesn't necessarily mean that you have gotten rid of hatred or greed or ignorance. It really doesn't mean that much. It is an experience that can be quite profound, but it can also take place on many different levels. It can take place on a very diluted emotional level, or it can take place after one has truly seen the emptiness of distinction between self and other. Fully understood it, and that is after extensive practice in which one has really examined these distinctions and seen their empty nature. Then one can realize the sameness of phenomena. And that can be quite profound. But still, that is not Buddhahood, because Buddhahood is simply awake. It is the stabilization of one's view, and the stabilization, I shouldn't even say one's, it is the stabilization of view in the awakening to the nature which is emptiness and luminosity. It is non-specific in that way. Does that make any sense?
Could we say it that the Arhat has realized or accomplished total renunciation?
Yes.
And the Buddha then has pure perception?
The Buddha is awake.
Well, I'm thinking of it as the way Rinpoche explained the three essences of, and it's renunciation, compassion, and pure perception.
Yes. Well, yeah, but there are many people who have accomplished pure perception in the, you're speaking of, for instance, the essence of Vajrayana. There are many people that have accomplished pure perception, have really accomplished the Vajrayana path. They are high-level bodhisattvas, but they have not achieved Buddhahood.
What is the relation to the Bodhisattva path and the Arhat state? Does the Bodhisattva at some point achieve the Arhat state, or does it sort of bypass it?
It's the other way around. The Arhat someday perceives the Bodhisattva stage. The Arhat actually has not entered into the bhumis. And so the Arhat then would need to take the vow of compassion and begin to meditate and then enter into the bhumis and then achieve Buddhahood. Okay, then let that be our parting thoughts for today.
So thank you very much for joining us today. It's always great to have you online and enjoying the teaching that we show a couple of times a week, Wednesday nights at 7:30 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. I do want to say, if you only join us on Sundays, next Sunday will be a little different. It will be, I believe, now I could be wrong, teaching by Kempo Norgay, and we don't know what it's on. So that you might be in for a surprise, but join us anyway if that's what happens. And otherwise, we'll just see you with another teaching of Jetsunma's. In addition, we also have meditation Saturday and Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. and also on YouTube. And those were all on YouTube. And then Medicine Buddha, which is on Facebook Live. And that's in the evenings at 7 p.m. And it's a very short Medicine Buddha practice that is a really wonderful place to put a lot of your prayer requests and to get some support for things that are meaningful for you and people that are suffering in your life, as well as to give support to others who are in the same position. So join then if that's what you like to do. And meanwhile, we also have silk offering ceremonies that gain a lot of merit. Those are daily, Monday through Friday, 5:30 p.m. except Tuesdays, which is at 4 right now, and then Saturday at noon and Sunday at 2 p.m. You can find all of this information if you go to tara.org, go to the Maryland events calendar. The link is in the chat, and the calendar there, it's, if you were watching this on tara.org, it would be the same page, and you can just go to the calendar, click on the event, and you can find out if it's going to be on Zoom, if it's going to be on, where it's going to be, and how can you get there, and if there's a practice, there's a link to download it so that you can fully join us in all of these ways. So we hope you do. And we also hope you come visit out here at KPC to our location. We are open outside, dawn to dusk, and there's a lot to do outside. So if you like the weather, which is a little humid today, but not too cold, so that's great, you can come and meditate outside and walk around the stupas and just gain a lot of peace and comfort and calm and be supported in that way in your practice. We also have animals you might enjoy out back that very friendly and like to have some petting, as well as just a lot of activities that are going on should you be an active geared person and want to participate. But and so just come check us out. We hope the inside will be open soon, but meanwhile we offer you all of that outside, and we hope you take part in it. So please please join us. And we'll see you soon. Wednesday night, 7:30. Thanks. Have a good week.